Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Please feel free to move your seat if it's easier to see, if you want to turn or anything. Good morning to everybody who's attending online as well, as we continue our hybrid approach to Dharma assemblies. Yesterday I realized that I hadn't given a talk for over a month. It was really nice. And thanks to Kogan for his work as the head student in presenting the Dharma, and then the Dharma combat ceremony last week that went off. I was a little worried about the hybrid model for Dharma combat, but I think it went very well. So thank you all for your hearty participation in that. This is how communities are forged, and this is how leaders are forged by the community. So thank you for your hearty participation in that. So right now, many places in the world that are connected with Japanese Zen traditions are in a deep meditation retreat. The 8th of December is the day that we celebrate the awakening of Shakyamuni Buddha in Japanese Zen traditions. There are some variations depending on the different type of tradition and the different place where we're talking about, whether it's China or Vietnam or Southeast Asia or India or Nepal or Tibet, and now in the various places in the West. There are various traditions, but within the Zen schools of Japan, the 8th of December is considered that most really important day in our tradition. And here at Buddha-e Temple, we celebrate with a 1-week meditation intensive and also a special ceremony that is commemorating the awakening of Shakyamuni Buddha, referred to as the Jodo-e. And that will happen next Sunday. That meditation retreat will happen over this week. So there'll be a number of people who are here in the hall sitting the whole week, pretty much throughout the day, every day. There's some little breaks for eating and doing a little bit of work and maybe some stretching or something, but pretty much people meditating throughout the week. And we do, rather than doing it from the 1st to the 8th, which is the most traditional, we have this retreat in the week in which the 8th falls. So the 8th is actually Tuesday this year, but we run the retreat from Sunday to Sunday, and then also have the Jodo-e. This year we'll have the Jodo-e ceremony on the last day, which will be next Sunday. So regardless of whether you're participating in that retreat or not, please feel connected to this very important time within our tradition. The foundation of Buddhism is the Buddha Shakyamuni's awakening. You could take away a lot of things and it would still be Buddhism. But without the awakening of Shakyamuni Buddha, there's no lineage, there's no path, there is no awakening appearing in the world. So this for us becomes totally central, as a pivot point of our tradition. And celebrating this central moment of our tradition, which if we locate it historically, happened around 2,500 years ago in the northern part of India, or what we call Nepal now. The area looked quite a bit different at that time, but that was the place and that was the time. To celebrate that moment, to bring forth a gratitude for having such an amazing teacher appear in the world. A form that helps us, gives us some shape and some direction in our own spiritual life, in our own spiritual path. A sense of what is it to practice? What is awakening? What is the practice that is awakening? What is the practice of awakening? What is the practice towards awakening? Shakyamuni Buddha becomes a model for that. A center of gravity, okay, something that we can return to, something that we can take refuge in, was established at that moment. We say, I take refuge in the Buddha. Right? No Buddha without the awakening. Buddha means the enlightened one, right? The awakened one. So there has to be an awakening for there to be a Buddha. So that we can take refuge because of the Buddha's awakening. Teachings emerged, not just any teachings, but teachings of awakening emerged through the Buddha. We can take refuge in the Dharma. And then the community of people who gathered around Shakyamuni Buddha to learn about his awakening and take it as their own path, right? To take that awakening as their path. We call them Sangha. Right? And so the Sangha also emerged through this awakening. And we can take refuge there. So this moment we celebrate is feeling that center of gravity. And it helps us to cultivate faith. And here by faith, I don't mean just believing in something that can't be proven. That's a very thin understanding of faith. I'm talking about the kind of faith that emerges from stepping into something, right? It being interesting enough, it being supportive enough, it being maybe mysterious enough that I'm willing to step in and see what happens. And as I step in and I step in, I step in, something starts to unfold. And the faith that's there is not a faith of just belief, but it's a faith that there is a continual stepping in, which I am invited to, and that I can be sure something will happen if I respond to the invitation. So all of these things are extremely important, and that's why year after year we celebrate the Buddha's awakening. But Uchiyama Roshi, in a couple of his books, he said, if people use the word but, forget everything they said before that word and only listen to what comes after the but, because that's actually what they wanted to say. So you don't have to forget everything I said up until now. Those are all very important, again. But why do this again and again and again and again and again? I don't know how many, I'm in 30 years in or something. Every year, we're getting closer to Rohatsu Sesshin. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I could escape this year. Maybe I could get out of it. Maybe I could go to the coast for a few days, or something. The challenge of Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening, while it's so beautiful and in a way comforting in the moment, which allows us to encounter refuge, it also is this deeply challenging thing. Because to walk the Buddha way is to walk that path of the Buddha's awakening. That's a big challenge to my life. And so then the question has to change a little bit. The kind of Christmas story of Shakyamuni Buddha is great. And it provides something culturally, it provides something that allows us to attune our life in a different way. But we have to also go into the deeper significance here. Not just the things spread out over time. 2,500 years ago, this wonderful thing happened, and so we're able to keep this practice going, and the world is improved and peaceful, and the Dalai Lama seems like a really nice guy. Like that kind of thing. Oh, it's wonderful, but what is truly alive? What did the Buddha encounter? What was the journey of the Buddha's life, which is also the journey of our life? Okay? What is awakening today? Not setting it off separated by time and by space, right? Because this awakening of the Buddhas is not confined to time and space. And so that Buddha's awakening is our awakening. And now the question becomes something more dangerous. Becomes something more dangerous. Not a word we're that fond of. By dangerous here, I mean that it challenges us. It will uproot things. It will cause us to move, cause us to explore, cause us to relinquish. We think about the story of Shakyamuni Buddha. It's made up of a few parts, and the legends are wonderful. I highly encourage you that if you're at all interested in the Buddha's life, this is a great time to read about it this week. There's many things online that you can read, many very reliable sites like Insight Meditation Society, or there's like dharma.net, or there's all kinds of things. You find it. Find the one you like. I prefer the ones that are more mythological than the ones that are a little bit more like, well, we can't quite tell. The historians are trying to figure out no, but you might like that kind. So whatever, find what is interesting to you. This is a great time to read about it, right? Because this week, in a way, is closer to the time of the Buddha's awakening than any other time. Maybe 2,500 years ago, but 2,500 times we've gone around this yearly cycle. And each year we draw very close to the Buddha's life here in the beginning of December. So good time to read, to drink it in. And the legends go in many different ways, but the basic components of the Buddha was born into a ruling family. He was a prince, usually, is the way that it's discussed. And that he grew up with a great wealth and luxury and training and education, and he was brilliant. But that didn't address something inside of him, and that he then encountered the four sights. The four sights being when he left the palace, or he left the fort, he saw first a sick person, an old person, a sick person, and then a dead person. And then he saw a renunciate. Those are referred to as the four sights. And this set something off inside of him. And he started his deep journey, spiritual journey, a quest to find out what it was at the center of his life that was driving his suffering, and what could be done about it. So he leaves the castle. He renounces that life. He becomes a yogi. And he practices diligently under two of the masters of his day, and becomes a complete, what would be the word? He rose to the level of being a teacher in both of those yoga traditions. Both of those yogis offered him the teaching seat, and wanted him to help them lead their communities, and he refused them. And then he took up ascetic practice, where he tried to crush his whole being for the purposes of releasing spiritual freedom. And it didn't work. And so he gave that up. He bathed himself. He received some nourishment from Sujata, a young woman, and his body became strong. He looked for the seat of awakening. And we are told that he found the Bodhi tree. Right? He gave birth to the great resolve to sit there underneath that tree until he had the penetrating insight. And he did. And 1 week he sat there. There's different versions of this, but we go with the 1 week. Otherwise our retreat will have to be 7 years long. So it's too much. So he sat there for a week. And on the rising of the morning star, said that he was awakened. And the famous lines, I, the great earth, and all beings together at this time attain to the way, or are awakened. That said that was the statement that he made. And in many versions of the story, he's then challenged by Mara, who's in the embodiment of delusion. And as Mara challenges him, who are you to be awakened? And said that the Buddha just simply touched the ground, which was a symbol or a gesture of saying, the earth is my witness. In that mudra, you often see a Buddha who's sitting and their fingers just touching the ground. That's the mudra of the earth witness mudra. The Buddha said, didn't fight Mara at all, didn't even say anything, just touched the ground. So this story, which you can, that's the very basic outline of the story. As you become more and more familiar with the story and you see details in different places that are meaningful to you, it becomes a really rich story, which you can come back to again and again and again and again. And you will find every time you come back to it that there are more parts of it that are wonderful. There are more parts of it that you didn't notice previously that come alive in you and become important to your own awakening. Right? But what I'd like to talk about this morning is the way in which we work with this story. It's very common for people to hear the story as a movement from point A to point B, right? So the Buddha starts as a prince. He starts as, we can't say he's just like a normal guy, right? He's like the best of what it would be to be in the normal realm, right? He's got everything. And not only does he have everything, but he's great at it, and he's kind, and he's strong, and he does all the things that you're supposed to do in that realm, the human realm. And he's got it completely. So that's point A. But he's not satisfied. There's something still gnawing at him. The fact of death, the fact of disease, right? The fact of aging. This confronts him in a deep way. Right? And he's unnerved by it. And so there is then this movement from that point A to, through this story to his Buddhahood. Right? That it's a movement in that way. That there's a process that unfolds. And this isn't a bad way to understand the story. Certain things will start coming out to you as you pay attention to it in that way. What is it to be a prince? In your own mind. What is it to be the heir to the throne of your own being? As you grow up and you start taking control, you start making your decisions. You're the ruler, right? And at some point that's foiled when you find out, like, hey, guess what? Actually, you're going to die. Pretty big blow to the ego, I would say, that one. And so it sets you off on a different path, rather than just how is it that I master the world as the ruler of my being? What else might be possible? And we give up just depending on that ego consciousness as the basis for our life. And we start to see there's another possibility, a whole other part of our being can arise. And this is where study, like yogic study, is so important. We start seeing into our being in a different way. We start allowing things to rise through us. Right? But so often we go there with ego consciousness. We go there with the idea that I'm going to make it happen. We go there with the idea that, I am the ruler, right? And I may need this extra juice. But now I figured out how to get it. So I'll get it from my yogic practices, etc. But it didn't work for him. And so then he tried to crush everything. He was like, if I could just shatter it all, if I could shatter every formation, every ego grasping, then I would be free, right? No more of this. So he did that till right the very, very brink of death. But still, he didn't feel free. He just felt completely demoralized. And there's this turning where he moves from that basic consciousness to the consciousness of receiving through the gift of Sujata, who brings him nourishment as he gives up his ascetic practice. We see this turning. You feel that turning in yourself when you're willing to receive. It's not just your project anymore, right? But it's a together with that happens through receiving. And then he begins to feel for the pivot point. He feels for what's the place, right? What's the centered place that has stillness as its fundamental quality and yet doesn't leave out the exuberance of the world, right? Not because my ego wants to find that place and then establish my kingdom upon it, right? But because there is some freedom right there in that access, and that's what I'm hungry for. So anyway, this is a way of I'm just giving you like an example of how you can play with the storyline to see that there's a process that's unfolding, and you can see that process unfolding in you. And it's not like you go from one place to the next place and then you're just done. It's like all these things are happening all the time. How many times will we leave the palace? How many times will we leave the comfort of what is known, the walls that we've erected for our own security, right? Which are important, right? But at some point we also have to be willing to journey beyond them. How many times will we do that? It doesn't just, not just once isn't enough. We do it again and again and again and again and again. So the story lives in this way. But, another but, there's something about this process-oriented way of thinking about it, looking at it like spread out through time, that can have this subtle coercion. There's a subtle coercion of our own being and how it is that we hold this legend. Like, oh, I'm supposed to do this part, I'm supposed to do that part. As I'm sitting meditation, I'm going in there and I'm trying to muck about with something. Right? I'm trying to make it be a certain way, rather than discover, rather than go through the process of exploration and discovery that the Buddha went through. And so it can be very helpful for us to also turn the way we hold this story and not to think about it as a process. That's also good, in the same way that celebrating this week like Christmas is good, right? But it has some problems with it. So we can turn the way we regard this story from being a narrative laid out in time to as a story, or as like a record of Gautama's continued stepping back from the known and finding out what is right here. He's yearning for freedom from this bound up part of his being, which is resulting in suffering. And so again and again in the story, he's just doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? And it's the act of exploration. He's stepping back, right? He's not just relying on what he knows and stepping into it and saying, oh, I'm going to go there, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. But he's saying, oh, what is here? How can I be guided by the experiences of life, guided to find that centered place of open freedom? The freedom of the heart, which is right here. We're all completely endowed with it. Your own mind, your own heart, at the base is completely free. And yet we bind it with all kinds of structures, right? All kinds of ideas, all kinds of karma is involved there. And so it has this twisted quality. And the Buddha was no different. But rather than just saying, it has this twisted quality, there's not much I can do about it, right? He said, oh, let me feel the twisted quality of it. Let me experience in each of these places and be guided to find that place of openness. The only way we find that release is through relinquishment. Now, relinquishment doesn't mean renouncing. Okay, if those two words I'm using really differently here. Okay, renounce mean like push it away, get it away, say I'll never do that again. Okay, relinquishment simply means stop mucking about. Stop trying to force it. Let things be. And as you let things be, we sometimes call this attention. You think attention is like holding your mind on something. That's a kind of attention, but the attention here that we're cultivating is letting things be. Letting them be is awareness. It's not like, oh, we're just ignore them, is letting them be. Letting them be is they're right here. Because if they're not in your mind, they're not a phenomena, at least for that moment, right? So all the things that are phenomena, all the things that occupy your world, that create your world, all the phenomena that appear before you so that you say, oh yeah, I'm here. Blah, 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 right? You're having experience. All of those things, the Buddha again and again and again and again was relinquishing, again, not meaning pushing them away, but letting them go and saying, oh, what is that center? And it led him through these things as a prince. He said, oh, I can't, this isn't working. Mucking about with all of these things to try to make it function. Yeah, there's some good things can come out of it, but that central point of awakening, I'm cut off from it. Right? He tried investigating that through yoga, and he found a lot of things out about himself and about the world and about heart and about mind, about consciousness, about body, right? But it didn't quite open up. Right? So he tried something else. He tried something else. He tried something else. He tried something else. Right? This is the point that I want to emphasize about the Buddha's story. Right? Again, hearing it as a process, that's good. But what is this immediate thing that the Buddha was up to throughout the whole story? This is what led him to the diamond seat. It wasn't the particular order of the things he did, or even the specificities of the things that he did. It was that journey, it was that path, which is the path of the Buddha. That is the path of an awakening being, to always return to that place of awakening. And we can see that throughout the story, and then we see it through the past 2,500 years as the followers of the Buddha have endeavored to do the same thing. And so in that way, rather than it being a story from point A to point B, the point is here. But it's a point that's here that has no there. It's not a point of like, oh, it's here in me, but it's not over there. I don't have to say it's not over there. That's extra. And now the here and the there are split off from each other. It's just here. Immediate. It's not a now and a then. It's not what's our life now and what was Shakyamuni Buddha's life way back when, 2,500 years ago. It's that the now and the then are only one time. In the beginning of the sutras, you see that again and again. It will say, at one time, the Buddha, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And usually people interpret that as being, oh, at one time, there was a certain time during his life where this happened. And that's one way to understand it. But there's another way to understand it. I once heard a lecture by a teacher that he talked about one time for like 2 days, and then he just talked about one for like a couple days. We're supposed to be studying the sutra, but all we did is study those two words, one in time, because they're so important. Right? That this one time of the sutras is completely intimate. It's not someone else's story from a long time ago, right? And it's not your story in the sense of it being your possession, a project of your, what do you call that? Like heritage to the throne. Right? But it is a story which also moves through you. This is what we call the Buddha way. Okay? The Tao. The path. It's the Jodo, it's the Do of Jodo. So the ceremony we'll have next week, that's Jodo-e. The Do is path. It's a path of awakening. The Jo is to become. It's an interesting expression. You could also say achieve, to achieve the path of awakening. But it also has a sense of unifying with, becoming one with the path of awakening. So that aliveness of the ungraspable center, right, that was alive in the Buddha all along. But what made him a Buddha was his total reliance on it. And how we function as sentient beings is we can't quite totally rely on it. But that's why we have practice. So that we can practice that total reliance, which is the awakening of the Buddha. So throughout this week, we'll be practicing diligently and encourage people to those of you who are joining in, here we go. Those of you who aren't, to also set up a way for your own commemoration of this week. If that's even spending a few moments in front of your altar, or if you don't have an altar, going outside. A tree is a good place to remember the Buddha. Go find a tree that's special to you and return there each day. Maybe bring a stone, place it there by the tree. Something. And all of those are equally good ways. Right? All of them are equally good. Read about the Buddha story, but most of all, feel for your own centered aliveness, the freedom which is there right in your heart, that you guard yourself from and guard the world from. And give it some room. Don't force it to be rambunctious, but give it some space. Care for it. And let it flow through you. Any questions or comments?
Ejo?
Hi.
Is any part of the Rohatsu week here going to be online?
There will be some access online through Facebook. Is that right?
Yes. Who is asking the question? I'm sorry, I missed the.
It's Myoan. Yeah.
Myoan. I'll. A few emails went out, but those who are interested in joining a live stream should email the office. There's quite a. Can you hear me? It looks like you can't hear me.
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh,
I can't hear you, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, please, those who are interested in joining online, please email the office. There's a particular process we'll go through to get you set up for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you will have like full. I was thinking of in the evenings, perhaps. So, I wouldn't be doing the whole.
Yes.
Rohatsu, but
Just please email us, and it's very straightforward. But I don't want to. There's some explanation that's very technical that
okay.
I won't go
Okay.
through here. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we need to ask for the email? This is Jinkai.
The email, the temple email's address is office@buddhaeye.org.
Okay, because I went to the Facebook page and I couldn't figure it out, so
Yeah,
I
it's not-
contacted.
It will start when the sesshin begins. So sesshin hasn't started yet, so the live stream will be of sesshin,
Okay. Thank you.
if that makes sense.
Ejo,
Mm-hmm.
for folks sitting in the hall all week, what's your advice? I've heard in the past, you said stop beating yourself up, stop, learn to love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of, I don't know, I think you can have some acupuncture needles up your sleeve.
Yeah. Well, this will be part of the talks that I give, but my advice is to go straight to the tree. And what I mean by that is the Bodhi tree is the axis. It is the place in which the whole world turns, and that seat of the Buddhas is totally still and yet totally connected to everything. Right? To go straight to the tree means that we have to let go of our muddling with everything that's turning around. And this is true for people in retreat as well as out of retreat. But when you're in retreat, the great support of retreat is we remove as much as possible of all the kind of mucking about that you need to do, to just keep life going. And so the every moment to just take that backward step. That's how the Buddha is very interesting in the legend. It says the Buddha first he's facing the tree as he walks around the tree, and then he turns and steps back and sits down and faces out from the tree. So as we're walking around, we're mucking about with everything, and the world's rocking around. Right? And there is a place where we turn and we step back. So to go there directly means to not make that a process. And especially for people who have sat a few retreats, if you're going to be here for a retreat, you have some story in your head. Oh, first day's like this, second day's like this. By the third day, it's kind of like this. rid of all of it. There's no first day, there's no second day, there's no third day, there's no first period of Zazen, there's no second period of Zazen. If you're really good at at that thorough relinquishment, you forget if it's lunch or dinner or breakfast. Someone will hit the thing for eating time, and you'll be like, oh, it's oatmeal, must be breakfast. To become stupid like that. This is a great gift that Sesshin offers us. We don't have that luxury in our normal life. And Sesshin is not supposed to be like the rest of our life. The aim of Sesshin is not that we should live like that all the time, right? But to go straight there in every moment. And that is not a severity of coldness or like brutality. It's actually deep love. It's like paying that much attention, caring for that much what is fully present. And so from the outside, sometimes it can look very like severe. There's people sitting, long periods of time, but that's all in the function of caring for, not in like cutting a part of myself off. At least that's my understanding of the practice and how I encourage people here. Right?
You said something about a turning point in the Buddha's practice from going from basically trying to crush himself into enlightenment to turning to receiving.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah. So everyone gets very excited about when Buddha gets to the tree and sits down, and I'm telling you all go directly to the tree, but going directly to the tree maybe is just directly encountering Sujata. And Sujata is the great hero of this story. She brings an offering to the Buddha, right? He's at his wit's end in terms of asceticism and his own the kind of crushing weight of his project, which he's fully embraced. To just get rid of himself totally, and that would be liberation. And it doesn't work, and so he doesn't know what to do. Very close to death, and then he receives this nourishment. Now, we can understand that receiving the nourishment within the arc of the story. He's given up that kind of asceticism, and now he's willing to see, there's some balance here. Actually, I do have to eat and stay relatively physically healthy to continue the practice. So that's one way of understanding it. But what I'm pointing to here is the receiving itself, the gift that emerges. And the descriptions of this are really beautiful about how Sujata finds him. She's hoping for a child, and she's been going to the woods to make offerings to the tree spirits because she hasn't been able to have a child. And her pregnancy is kind of miraculous, and then she brings this offering to the tree spirit, who is the Buddha, but she thinks he's a tree spirit. Anyway, there's a lot of legend around this, but the reason I'm saying all that is that this is the quality of receiving, that there is this mysterious way in which our needs and the world, they meet each other. I'm not saying that everyone always gets what they need, right? But I am saying that on the spiritual path, there's a way in which our own needs and the world are corresponding to each other. And when we open and we receive, this is the same action as relinquishment. It's a relinquishment of holding the door closed and thinking, I'm going to do it. And it's opening the door and seeing, this medicine flows through all of these various beings, which are my life. They're not just part of my life, they are my life. Right? What I call my life is all of these beings. They don't have to be one, or they don't have to be many. They just come in through me. And so, or they're meeting me, and I'm meeting them. And so this is this turning point, then the Buddha's ability to be able to feel for that centered freedom shifts significantly. I mean, to me, this is like a pivot point. Yeah. So in our own practice, we can think about that, and our own, maybe rather than saying practice, I'll say our own exploration, our own walking on the path. What is the place where I'm unwilling to receive, where I'm just trying to crush something and get it out of me, because I think that's where the freedom's going to come from, is if I can just crush this thing, and then something will be able to move through. What is it that is meeting me? What is it that I can receive in that place, which allows for a different kind of walking from that point forward? This is, to me, the kind of koan, or the teaching of that part of the story. Does that answer your question, or does that respond?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. There's also a grass cutter. Who, I can't remember his name right now. Boy, who is cutting grass, and he later on, when the Buddha is approaching the Bodhi tree, he gives the grass to the Buddha, and the Buddha receives that as an offering. There's another place where this kind of offering appears in the story. Maybe we have time for one more.
Ejo? Whenever I hear this story about Siddhartha, now that I'm a mother, I always wonder, how come we never hear about, like, I always think it was huge for his mother to be able to relinquish her son and watch him do all these things that, the asceticism, the going away, and if his awakening, all of that is true, and all the Buddha, the Dharma, he accomplished what he did because of all the people behind him who set up this time for him to step into this. So I guess, and that's how our stories are, though. They're usually the male hero and the people who set him up for that are sort of not mentioned, but I just have to mention that.
Yeah.
A mother.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. The Buddha's biological mother passed away shortly after his birth, but then he was raised by his mother's sister, and she was the mother figure for him. He was in an environment where he was raised by a whole community of people who were living there together. I mean, the kind of servants and those type of people as well. So there was a whole community, a whole ecosystem of his life, which was, I think you say very beautifully, that's how he was able to live. That's how he was able to do the things that he did, is because of all of that. And there's two things about that I would just add on to what you were saying. This is one of the things I love about the Buddha's story, is he returns to that. He says, I and all beings are awakened, right? He doesn't say, oh, I'm awakened. I'm the hero. I got through it. I'm the one. He says, this is an awakening of everyone, right? And then he teaches that awakening of everyone. And his aunt, who becomes his mother figure, she becomes the first of the women, Mahapajapati. As she becomes his student, and she also becomes important awakened one of the community. And so his commitment to the involvement of all things in that pivot point where he took the seat, that comes through the Buddha's teachings, again and again, and as very, has flowed through societies that are very patriarchal and have a certain way of holding the story. And stories themselves, stories of heroes. This is a hero story. Stories of heroes that always create the shadow in the way that you tell the story. But I find that there is a medicine right within the story itself, rather than just holding up the hero. We see that the hero is inviting all beings, or recognizing that all beings are participating in that great accomplishment. That's why the turning at the point of Sujata to me is so important, or that's one of the reasons. Is it's breaking down, up to that point, it's all his heroics. That's what's getting him. That's his motivation. But the heroics don't allow him to really find that freedom. They're always pressured in the heroics. And here at the point of meeting Sujata is something turns. And he starts to listen. From that point in the story, he's looking for the seat, and he's wandering around. Where is this place that doesn't move? And he goes up to the top of Pragbodhi mountain, and he's thinking, oh, this would be a good place. And then a spirit, the mountain spirit, speaks to him and says, no, this isn't a good place. Don't sit down here. It will crush the worlds. And he says, oh, okay. He just listens to the spirit. Right? And then he descends and he goes into a deep cave. He meets a Naga there. And then he's talking with the Naga. He's listening to the Naga. And then another spirit comes and says, no, this isn't the right place. There's a place down in the valley by the river. There's a tree. And he says, oh, he listens. Right? And then he moves in that direction. So I think appreciating that part of the story, really learning about all of these other beings, some of them human and some of them otherwise, that were part of his journey is so important. So thank you for bringing that forward. Okay, so next week we'll have a Jodo-e ceremony, and hopefully people will come and online as well as in person. And the only thing that I would recommend is, if you're going to come online, if you have any way to make an offering where you are. So if you have an altar, if you have some incense ready or something like that, there's a part of the ceremony where everyone who's assembled comes forward and makes a small offering of burning incense. And it's hard to do that through the camera. Maybe if we had a little robotic arm, we could have everybody doing that, but we're not quite there yet. So if you prepare something, it can be anything. It could be a little tea that you're going to offer. It could be some incense. It could be a flower, but something. And if you don't have an altar, just kind of creating a little space where you would be able to make that offering during that part of the ceremony will help it be more connective for you and for everybody, the assembly to be together.